on your own.
Through the basic, can't think of Frida connected us with people at the state. And
We had really good people doing a lot of really good work.
Go back to the same seat.
Sorry, I missed this afternoon or this morning,
Yeah.
it's hard around noon time, it's very short, because
You're here now.
I'm here now, but I was thinking fondly as well.
That's good.
It
to
was
know.
well attended. You were well covered. You ready?
As ready
Let's go.
as we're gonna be.
Okay.
So, do you have anything you want to lead off with, or should we jump in? Okay, so we've now been at this for 11 hours. So we're not going to try to repeat everything that we did today, but we'll let you know that the stakeholder meetings with department heads this morning from 9 to basically 11, and with planning and zoning folks from 11 to about 12:15 were incredibly informative. Russ will share a few things. He's been doing some research in anticipation of today. And then we met with the elementary and middle school folks. And then we went over to the private school at 4 o'clock and met with them. And that was just set up today. It was really helpful. Town staff helped us put it together. And then we had to drive around town a bunch too. So today has been a little bit overwhelming, to be honest. But we're getting all the information we need that won't just come out of the raw data or won't just come out of the master plan. So what I think what we wanted to do tonight is just kind of check in, because it seemed like if we were gonna come over and have the stakeholder meetings, that we should be checking in with all of you, because I think last time was really an interview. So that you have a sense of where we're at now, what we're looking at. We have had most of our questions as far as like getting data and resources met today. But to talk about that, to talk about a timeline for us to deliver kind of an interim set of findings to you, and how to do that in August. And then talk about how we're gonna handle the outreach, because I start getting nervous if we don't have dates picked and things like that. So those were kind of the things that were on our agenda for tonight.
Yeah, I think most of you are here. I mean, I'll just say, be very brief, because I can't absorb everything and kind of boil it down totally, but I agree with Steve. It's been very helpful today, very, very productive and helpful day. A lot of the things, I luckily had some time to do some research before, some number crunching before, and a lot of the numbers that stood out to me is, oh, I don't know about this number, have been confirmed as appropriate. The assessed valuation per dwelling unit is one example that stands out, which is, $400,000 to $450,000 per unit, which I thought was, there must be something wrong here. And then I tried to test it my own way, and it seemed to test out okay as well, and then confirmed this morning as well. So a lot of the things that I had worked on, school enrollment trends, enrollment by grade, have pretty much been confirmed that, the number work is going along smoothly. And we're through a lot of the number crunching, the background number crunching. I'm through a lot of the background number crunching on the town. I mentioned, I know to at least one of the groups this morning, that you have what, in my experience, is unusual, in that you have a high tax rate relative to other communities in the county, and you also have a relatively high assessed valuation, per housing unit. So what that amounts to then is your typical tax bill, if you take that, I did it at $450,000 times your tax rate. The typical tax bill is around $12,000 for residents in town. Countywide, I'll look just to make sure I'm not misstating. It was less than half that, I think. I'll have to go back and look, but significantly lower than that. Okay, maybe I think 5,000. So you might be, by factor double the typical tax burden per residential unit. The reasons for that, your tax rate isn't high because your values are low, which is what you typically find. Franklin, city of Franklin, high tax rate because of low values. You have relatively high costs. I think the roads are part of it, having driven around the town today, and you pointed out several times. Your school costs are higher, but the quality that you're getting is also higher. There's a correlation between your tax base and the quality of your schools. There's a correlation between your tax rate and the amount of open space conservation land that you have, but also that also contributes to the residential values. So you sort of have, the town, I think over time, I'm almost thinking, and I'm thinking out loud here, has sort of evolved into a community that has a very high quality of life, reflected in the amount of open space, quality of schools, I would say.
But not the quality of roads?
Pardon?
But not the quality of roads?
Some of
All
them are
but
in
one we
great shape.
saw.
Yeah, some of them are in great shape. And so,
The state roads are.
The state takes care of those.
I think I have a pretty good handle on the numbers. I'm sure I'll backfill some of them as far as the basic numbers of growth. Town's not growing very fast. About 60 housing units permitted since the year 2000. So very modest rate of growth. Population, our estimates at this point, because we're not right on a census year, but stable, maybe declining a little bit because households are getting a little bit smaller. Very unusual to have stable or growing school enrollment, and I've learned a lot about why that is. The quality of the schools are attracting people with school kids. And the bottom line is the next thing I'm going to do is try to start building the model that says if you add X housing units at this value, then this will be the impact on, I'm not sure what the best measure is. It might be the tax rate, but it takes a lot to move the tax rate a little bit. So it might not be the tax rate, it might be town expenditures versus the incremental revenue. It might be a lump sum dollar amount. I'm gonna do different scenarios. I don't know, at this point, I think, whether there's sort of one answer. I don't think there is. I think there's, if it's going to be sensitivity analysis. It's going to be if this, then this. If this much new residential, then this much higher revenue, this much higher expenditures, and this much lump sum impact. And that's an easy way to sort of convey. So I can almost envision the table. You're all familiar with, analysis that says, okay, new residential units, value per unit, and then show the revenues and expenditures that result from it with backup details. So I'm feeling pretty comfortable about the study right
I
now.
really like the idea of the if, then,
Yeah,
especially if there's a range provided. So that in the past, what we've had are pretty one-dimensional presentations where,
Yeah.
Do you like this, do you not like that? Well, this from the way you're talking, really will give people a range that they can get their arms around and then get a sense of, well, are we willing to do that, or do we want to go down that road?
yeah.
Right,
If
you
you,
get a dialogue around
Right.
that.
if you got 200,000 square feet of warehouse or industrial space, this would be the value you get out of it in terms of tax revenues, and this would be the likely expenditures, or a reasonable estimate of expenditures, and then therefore this is the bottom line. So that's what I plan to do. I mean, it's even possible, I don't know if I want to do this, but to present it to the group. Well, I do want to do this preliminarily, and you can tweak, say, Russ, I think you should, this is too high, or we'd really like to see this many new housing units, see what that looks like.
Can I ask a question about the housing units?
Yeah.
Are you gonna break down as into type of housing units, or is it all just gonna be single family, or is there a way for you to model, say, small condominium complex, apartments, that type of thing, so that we can get a picture? 'Cause we know what we got. We got single family homes.
Right,
Just a
yeah.
few condos.
But if you want to have more options in the
Yeah.
future, what it will
So,
look like.
Yeah.
exactly, so.
Thank you, yeah. I can do that.
And I would just add too with that, if we're looking at different types of potential land uses, we want to present that with what we've learned from all of you about some of the limitations that might not make some of those things happen. Transportation limitations, telecommunications limitations, things that might also
School
resolve
capacity.
themselves over time. But we want to add that to the conversation when we share it with the public.
And I'm glad to hear that you would like to present some preliminary
Yeah.
numbers, because I think that would give us a chance to give you guys feedback,
We need that.
hopefully, you know, hone in on something, sharpen in on something.
Yes, absolutely,
Say,
that's what I
well, we
want.
don't think this is quite,
It-
as well as, you know, talking about what the key assumptions are that
Yeah.
go into the
Absolutely,
model. 'Cause
yeah.
we know these things are, you know,
When I
they're
look
only
at,
as good as the assumptions you make at the beginning.
Right.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And give us a chance to have some back and forth about those things, just to make sure we're honing in on the correct answers.
When I see something like this, I know that it's a sophisticated group, that will be able to keep up with the analysis. I'm more challenged in trying to keep up with you guys than concerned about whether you'll keep up with me, because you've done a lot of good work here, and the interviews this morning also showed a lot of insight and.
Flattery will get you everywhere.
Good.
So you-
No, I'm being sincere about it. You've done a lot of good work in the community already. So we're gonna end up then with these scenarios. We'll present them. Steve is talking about sometime in August. Looking at my email today and the other, where, I call them where's my calls. Where's my report, Russ? Where's my report? I have two of them on there today. So hopefully not right away in August, not early August. But give me some time to absorb what we have already heard today and what the number we're crunching on done. So that will be what I think will be the bottom line of my analysis, will be those scenarios and, you know, what impact it will have on, bottom line impact.
And will there be, I don't know how, you know, kind of multi-layered thing, aside from giving ranges, I guess things like, we talked about tipping points and stuff, but so even where you've got something and you're laying out, well, we'll have this much net gain, things like the break-even point, where, how far down the line will there be a break-even point, things like that, so that we know, you know, what we're gonna get and when.
Yeah, it gets complicated if you try to do multi-year analysis for a variety of reasons. Now you're starting to make assumptions about the tax rate in the future. You're starting to make assumptions about property values in the future. The way I typically do the work is, it's if you had 50 more units in the town today, given your revenue and expenditure patterns, what would the bottom line be today? We really want to measure the impact of growth and not the impact of Russ's assumption about tax rates and whatnot. So I'm thinking that my thought is to do it as a more or less static analysis, and then
As if it were here today.
Right.
you know, in the future, the tax rate may be, you know, I have to make then assumptions about the tax rate. Well, if I say I'm keeping the tax rate constant, all I'm doing is taking the 50 housing units and spreading them out over 10
It starts
years.
to get to be like three-dimensional chess or something.
Yeah, or it doesn't illuminate anything extra. I want to make it clear that if you had 50 more housing units or 200,000 square feet of commercial space in the town today, I want that to be the independent variable. And the revenues, given the town structure, we don't know the, you know, what the future might be. There might be tax reform in the state, who knows, you know. Okay, bad analogy, bad example.
Sorry, he used always good jokes.
The
earlier.
comedy section is.
So,
Eric's good.
Yeah, so we're talking, we've been talking about this in terms of, okay, suppose there are 50 more residential units or 100 or a warehouse or whatever. I think that's valuable to know, but I think we'd also like to know, you know, how feasible is it for us to get 50 residential units, to get
Oh,
100
okay.
residential
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
if we could phrase the question as, suppose we change this in zoning, you know, without doing a full build out, because, right? Because we need to know, if it turns out that 50 residential units is a beneficial thing for the town, we need to know how to get them.
Yeah.
Right? So I think to some degree we want to know, okay? if-
The probability,
if
so
we
some of the
zoning
probability of
regulations
the,
this way, and
yeah.
then taking the analysis forward from there.
And are those, I mean, getting back to what Dave said a little, how are you gonna figure that? Are these generic units? Or are you gonna break them down like Dave was talking about? How do you
Well,
do that?
yeah, I think the easiest thing is probably on the first pass of everything, to keep them pretty clean.
Yeah.
In other words, this is the impact of new single-family housing, this is the impact of new multifamily housing, or condominiums, or, this is, and keep them pretty pure. And then you may find at the meeting in August, you may say, Russ, what we really like is this mix. Would you run, and I may even do it, 50 new single-family, 50 new age-restricted elderly housing units, and 200,000 square feet, can you run that? Yeah. So we can do a hybrid, I guess, is also, but I think,
You're gonna start somewhere.
yeah, you gotta
See what
start somewhere,
happens.
and
Right.
the cleaner and more transparent the analysis is, the more the town is gonna learn, I think.
Will you be able to show the impact of, let's say, your 50 housing units on all the services in town? At what point do we have to go to three police officers? At what point do we have to go 24 hours a day on some services? Or in the school, where do we go to build a new school? Do you have trigger points that you're gonna build into this? Because otherwise, this is what really impacts. I mean, the town of Lyme goes like this, they're big steps.
All communities do,
I
except
know.
very large
Yeah,
communities.
yeah, and so I think that's, we've got to first determine where we are in those steps.
We tried to do that in the interviews today. We tried to get at that. And I might be missing something, but, and particularly the schools, we know where the trigger point is, about 50 more students. And then you're starting to.
Yeah, it depends on where the students are though.
True,
Number of classrooms.
yeah. But once you get 50 more, according to the, your superintendent, 50 more students, then you gotta start thinking about modifications to how to accommodate them. So we've got that trigger point. We know already that the fire station and the roads are issues, continuing issues. But I haven't heard, I don't know, Steve, if I'm missing something, but I haven't heard that I recall in the discussions today, other capacity type issues in town. I mean, this building's relatively new. We haven't interviewed your police chief. I will talk to him probably over the phone.
Yeah, I saw him actually after our meeting this morning, and I suggested that he come in and see you guys at 1 o'clock. I thought
Yeah.
but I guess he didn't.
Right, yeah.
We'll catch up with
We'll catch up, yeah. So, I don't know, the trigger points tend to be, I'm thinking a bit out loud, but, things like sewer and water can be trigger points. Need a new treatment plant, big
Not an
deal.
option here.
Well, could be.
Not a factor here.
But the factor is, how much water do we have?
Now, that's beyond the scope of this study.
Oh, I know, but
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that
Yeah.
we should be talking about anyway.
And I think a lot of that, if you look at, like, in our scope of work, part of this is like, how do we tell the story to the community about the analysis that was done? So some of that will be our understanding of the community, which will be probably obvious to most people, but so that they understand that we understood the context of your land use constraints, your existing zoning regulations, the focus of your master plan, the information from the different departments, and then all this data. And that coming together, there are these ways forward which present these challenges because of some of the constraints that exist. And if there are any clear ways forward that need to be refined further or pursued, at that point we'll be able to share those. And I think that, back to Eric's comment about kind of sharing the initial thoughts at the end of August. That's our hope, is to share that with you in a complete enough presentation that you can say, okay, you missed some important things. I'd rather do that in front of all of you than with, you know, full community and forum.
I have a comment and a quick question. My first comment is that one of the reasons why I was asking about different types of housing units, was both Lebanon and Hanover put in fairly large apartment unit complexes,
Yes.
well beyond the scope of anything that we would do here in Lyme.
Sure.
Yeah.
But they predicted that they would get so many more students in their schools, which didn't show up.
Right.
And so, I guess my concern is that we take that into consideration as to, you know, when we're doing the different types of units, that not all types of units attract the same demographic. And so you're gonna have different amount of school kids.
They have a lot of nurses, I think, you know,
It's a huge
young
part.
nurses that don't have kids.
And
Well,
residents.
assuming if we were to put something like that, obviously not the scope, but we would also get a similar demographic, I would think.
Yeah.
Okay, my
Well,
second-
somewhat similar, yeah. Yeah, like Timberwoods is 225 units, I think there's 3 kids.
Yeah, so my question is that, when we're looking at this, we have to think about what's the reality of this area. Now, you just demonstrated, I think 60 units since 2000 means that we're a very slow growing town in a very slow growing, if not depressed area that's losing population. So if we were to say, okay, we want to try to build out 50 more units, well, where are these people going to come from?
Mhm.
You know, and that would be kind of the type of questions that I would hope you'd be able to help us with, to say, is that even conceivable that we'd be able to find people to build, to move into town and put some more units?
I mean, obviously, the town's not gonna, this is not gonna be an enterprise that's run by the town, so some developer is gonna have to figure out that this is a
Right, right. I
profitable
mean,
thing, and
Once again, it doesn't do us any good to say, okay, this is what we'd like to happen, and developers laugh at us, you know, so put it up.
Yeah, I think that I can reflect, you can't be precise about
No,
it, I can reflect on the general likely, unlikely,
Right.
probable, neutral.
You know, when we met with the Purcells from Pondview, we talked about their residents. And it's mostly grad students from the college, residents, interns, and young professionals. And they have a obvious turnover, but they stay full.
Mhm.
And it's knowing that there's a high demand for housing of all kinds in Napa Valley, I don't think there's an issue.
Well,
Where
that's
they go
also
from.
particularly, that's right on the border of Hanover, which is a good place, a really good location with a fast,
Well, I have an
easy exit.
apartment on that dead end road and I have no problem keeping it full.
Do you have an apartment on the dead end? What road is that?
I thought you were familiar.
I'd like to.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, you know, in Hanover, we haven't seen a major subdivision in like 15 years. Development is not happening in a big way
Right.
unless you can be on water and sewer. And that's the only place where we've had a big, you know, our bound communities, like Lyme, and we've had some development.
Sachem Village, all that.
Sachem and Lebanon.
Oh, that's true,
So,
yes, yeah.
not an issue
You're right,
in
yeah.
Hanover, and we have a third phase of a citizen development residential project that has been languishing for probably 12 years now, not built out, and it's already permitted.
Mm.
So, you know, it needs a new alteration of train permit from the state, but otherwise, it's ready to go, and it hasn't been built. So, and that's more townhouse situation, so, and that's like, you know, 5 minutes from the hospital.
Mhm.
Right.
So I think we have to be realistic about what kind of housing sells here. Another question I had was, we talked a little bit about the kind of jaggedy nature of capital improvements, but I wonder if you have looked at the staffing in this community, and it's my view that it might be a little understaffed,
Mhm.
and so it wouldn't necessarily be the capital, but the staffing labor that would need to be added to.
Are you thinking administratively? Administrative staff in this building?
I think in this building for sure,
Yeah.
but I don't know if the road crew,
Right.
you know, I don't know. I mean, I'm familiar with Hanover, which is like way bigger.
Yeah.
But I didn't know if towns have similar budgets or similar road mileage, if
Yeah.
we're like up to speed with staffing, just.
Mhm. I think the way, I mean, a quick answer, we don't have the scope to get into the weeds on that issue. One way that I can handle it within the scope that we have is to, let's say, the per capita expenditures here in Lyme for police protection is $400 per occupied housing unit. I can say that as part of the scenarios, and that's only one example, but can do this with much of the town budget and just say, let's bump that up by 20%, presuming understaffing or other requirements that growth will impose that aren't transparent to us now. What happens? I think that's realistic, but to do a staffing analysis, I think, Municipal Resources out of there that does MRI, does that kind of stuff. They're expensive studies in and of themselves, so we can't get in, down to that, do we need a new, exactly when do we need a new fireman?
More dump hours, and, it's kind of also, our rec stuff is run by volunteers, we have our head select people, staffing the dump. And at some point, the volunteerism, gets old, for doing some of these things, and, at some point, those get more professionalized, when we have staff at the dump.
Part of the problem is, we recognize we need more staff, and we've had ads out for years, and not getting any responses.
Well, maybe there's something to do with salary, because, I don't know, I haven't responded, I don't know where you are.
3.5% employment this year or something, somewhere in that
Right.
range.
Yeah.
It might even be less than that, right?
It's 2.5.
Administratively.
So that's.
And it's
the issue right
typically
there.
the lowest in the state.
Yeah.
It doesn't fluctuate that much, it's always low in the Upper Valley.
Yeah.
Andover, Lebanon has the lowest unemployment rate, usually in the state, good times or bad.
And we did talk this morning about, the select board has recognized the need for a town administrator. And not full-time, obviously, but it's coming.
Yeah, and that person's gonna cost some money.
Right.
You
It's gonna
can't
cost
cheap
money.
out on that if you want somebody to do a good job.
The analysis is trying to look at the impact, the fiscal impact of growth in the community.
Yep.
So let's say I run the analysis of 100 housing units and plug in a number for value or assessment. And then run a number based on cost per housing unit now, the town's current cost. And I run that through, and you've got $2 million left over after assigned expenses that when this group looks at what I've presumed, you say, well, yeah, okay, nobody knows, but there's at least a logical base to it.
So
Hopefully.
just to be sure I understand, you're saying that you get a net benefit.
Let's say it was.
increased Revenue, let's say, right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Don't hold them to it.
Yeah, no,
Right.
I'm just making sure I understand your
Yeah.
assumption, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
so at that point, you might say, gee, $2 million in a community that has a total property tax appropriation of $9 million, that's a pretty significant positive factor.
I'd like.
Fiscal impact analysis that I tell people is, it's not a precise, although you have to, I wish that you could have the numbers in the report be some darker than others and some lighter, so they could be vague, but the numbers are numbers.
Yeah.
So I think that what I say when I'm doing these studies, fiscal impact studies for a specific development, I'll say, look, there's really 3 buckets. Clearly positive, not sure, and clearly negative. And so we want to dimension it's almost, it's going to be not that crude, of course, it'll be more refined than that. But that's really what it comes down to. Is this good or not good, How good, how not good, how neutral, So that's what I hope to be able to
So I
measure.
guess a different way of getting at what I was trying to get before. So when you have these analysis and conclusions, will you be adding some color to them insofar as commentary, or it'll just be, this is, strictly a number thing, this is a good thing, this is how much money we got, or will there be any discussion about some of the...
Yeah. Initially, it'll be just the numbers, and then get your feedback. And then in the final report, there'll be, descriptive, along the lines you're talking about, descriptive probabilities. Why is it that this is this way? What's the likelihood of this scenario evolving in the community? When I did the work for the downtown Lebanon study, I tried to project regional needs for housing, non-residential office space, retail space. So it's a benchmark that we can I can go back to, and that was just done last year, so it's pretty fresh. Yeah.
Have you looked at the houses for sale?
Not yet.
No, we just talked about that today.
No, I haven't
Real
really-
estate.
Because one of the critical points is not only houses for sale, but the price bracket.
Yes.
Because the one thing which isn't selling are houses with 5 or 6 bedrooms.
Right.
There are unfortunately a number of those.
The older colonial.
Yeah. But I think it would be, because that's sort of your cushion. And if there are, that would be, I think, very helpful.
Yeah, we're gonna look at the MLS.
Yeah.
We got a lot of big houses built, when the SD subdivision came in, Tavern Lane and all that. Yeah, and that was like a blast
Right.
of kind of.
When was that?
Was it
'80s.
late 80s, maybe early,
That-
yeah, like 30
Probably
years ago, 25
the
years ago.
86 to 89. Because there was a
No,
recession
no,
from
that's
89,
That's
after
after that.
89.
That's when they
Say
were,
later.
that's when the subdivision occurred, so
Yeah.
that
Oh,
was in the
okay.
nineties.
Zoning was passed in 89, and it was a few years after that.
Yeah, but those are big homes and they're new.
Yeah.
So I perceive we have a bunch of them too, it's not just old,
Right.
1700s.
One of the things I am gonna, that I found out I can get is a dump of your database
Yep.
into Excel spreadsheets.
Yep.
So I'll be able to look by bedrooms, if that's in the database. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, but square footage is in there, certainly, and valuations and year builds, and so I'll be able to, that's one big chunk of data that I don't have yet.
So I've been sitting on a couple questions here about how feasibility of any of these things is gonna factor into your discussion. We've talked about maybe 200,000 square feet of retail space or something or another.
Mhm.
How do you handle the fact that, 200,000 square feet of retail space, that might not be economically feasible?
It's not.
Right.
Right, okay, good.
But we have to, I think, answer the question because
So-
people wanna know.
Yeah,
Right.
because, no developer is gonna come in and do that because there's only
Right, we can list the
5,000
transportation.
cars going
permits.
by it every
Yeah.
day, and so how do you factor that in? Do you just exclude it, or do you just say, well, pretend if we had 200,000 square feet of retail space, even if it were not economically feasible, it'd have this impact?
Yeah, I think you do that in the first instance. You just kind of say, if, then.
Right.
And then, after we've looked at it and digested it, try to be halfway reasonable in the initial scenarios. To be, to not be crazy in the initial scenarios. And then, after we get some feedback and refine things a little bit, discuss the probability,
All right.
And it's never 100%, but, weird things happen in communities, in terms of development.
The first thing you guys asked us in the earlier meeting was, what were the limitations, what was
Right.
preventing development
Mhm.
in town? And certainly there are factors preventing development from happening, and there are properties that could be developed now for commercial. It's not happening.
Mhm.
So something is going on that's preventing it, so just because it's available doesn't mean it's gonna happen.
Well, yeah, and, you're right about the Upper Valley. When I did the analysis, I always think of it as a very vibrant economy. It's actually a very stable regional economy, it's growing. The hospital is going to be
The
added.
hospital, we used to have the first office in the VA.
Right. Hypertherm, so things are happening, and
Yeah.
I think that Lebanon which has the land and the utilities, is becoming more, been working with Lebanon almost constantly over the last couple of years. It's getting more pro-development, because their tax rate is getting out of control with the sewer separation project. And so, I sense that Lebanon is becoming a little more accommodative than they have been, so.
You got a comment? I think you
Well-
have more too.
Yeah, go ahead, Earl.
I've never made much headway with it. However, it does seem to me that Lyme, Orford, Piermont, and maybe even Haverhill, it seems as though these towns could do a lot more of sharing. He talks about a town manager, or whatever you want. And it's hard to find somebody that's gonna work X number of hours, but maybe one can take care of three
Yeah,
towns.
circuit rider.
And it just seems that we don't develop that area. It's really, I think, almost being done not to acknowledge the fact that these three towns should eventually, somehow, work together to give better service and perhaps save some money.
You bring
I
it,
don't know, anything that you're doing probably is beyond what you're doing, but I don't know how we ever can get further into that.
It's not an economic type question, and by that I mean, it's not an economic issue there. It would be advantageous for communities in New Hampshire to share, services and costs. In the rest of the country, and I mean, I've worked in 35 different states, I was telling Steve, county is the local unit of government, not town or a city. So you do have that broad set of services built in, broad-based for services. But in New Hampshire, there's been some school, obviously, SAU type combinations, and they're breaking up rather than getting stronger.
I think where that can come in though, Earl, is, when we talked in a moment about public outreach, one of the things we've been tasked with doing is asking people, well, how would they reduce the expenses within the town? So ideas like that coming from the community and being discussed to see if they're viable or if they could be, investigated further. Because it's not just gonna be about what else can you bring into town, but there's a clear request to us to provide a venue for discussing whether or how town expenses might be constrained or reduced, I think in that case.
Back 20 plus, 20, 30, 40 years ago, we set up for Hanover, Norwich, White River, Lebanon, and the select people got together monthly. And there was periodically, they worked together. I'm not sure that you were, I don't
The
think.
regional planning commission convened some of that,
Yeah.
but there was definitely.
Well, it started with the
cooperative
Mushroom
buying.
Museum,
Yep.
and Ally Quinn and that group.
Yep.
And, but it dies. Sue, have you ever gotten together with the Orford, Piermont and so forth? I mean, we have, this is what we should be doing, is trying to develop just a lunch once a month so people could complain about all their problems,
So I
and maybe they
think
could work together.
It's a good idea, but I don't.
And
I
it's
don't
not,
know
it's not
that
with
really-
you, but I mean, I think.
It
this
could come
is-
out as a recommendation.
It's just what I need, is another meeting.
Yeah. It'll be the next select board.
Right.
Can we go back to your questions? 'Cause I wanna get to
The
outreach.
other feasibility question I had is, what's the effect of geographic feasibility? Where would you put 200,000 square feet of anything?
Mhm.
I mean, maybe there's space to south of town, maybe, and is that something you're gonna try to factor in?
Not down to the actual parcel, like, we're not gonna say on these parcels you can do
Yeah,
these
right,
things, but
sure.
we're getting a sense between all the meetings today of what areas do have some potential. We can look at the zoning and see what might need to change to make some of that happen.
Okay.
We can at least, we're getting a good enough, we're getting pointed in the right direction.
Yeah, I think there's three aspects to it. There's a market aspect.
Right.
Will they come? There's the current sort of zoning and development controls that you have in place now. Are they conducive to this scenario? And then there's the land forms,
That's
and
the term of
infrastructure.
art, the land.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's physical, and then there's actually four, because I didn't write down infrastructure as well as a limiting
Right.
factor. Primarily roads and,
Internet.
internet, right.
Water.
I understand that's getting close to being,
It's a couple
What else
constraints.
then?
yeah.
But part of this-
Up the speed on that, literally up the speed on the
That's
internet.
good.
Yeah, it's getting better.
And part of this is just helping the rest of the population understand that all of these pieces have to fall in place for something to work, and that any one of these might be a breaking point for an idea not moving forward, even if you all endorse it. Can we switch and talk about kind of the timeline? Because what I want to do at some point is get him home so he can rest, so he can write the part of the report he needs to write. What I'd like to do is, we had some discussion last time we were here about potentially doing a teleconference. So to see if, for one, if that's an option, if we could meet with you guys remotely, if we set materials ahead so you could have a report in front of you and you could talk with us by video conference. So that's the first question, if we could do that in late August,
So we would all come here maybe and then
except
sit
us.
around,
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
sit together.
Do we have the
Sit around the
technical-
table.
Do we have the
Do we have the
technology?
We don't have the video technology.
Well, all we need is an internet.
Or we're just gonna
You know,
say-
Get enough screen for people to look at.
And if you, I use a software Zoom
That's what I
all the
would use as
time,
well.
which
yeah.
you can do
Zoom
from
is
your
very
home.
good. Yeah.
And if you have one of these silly machines that has your
So
camera.
everybody would have to bring their own.
No, you could do it, you wouldn't have to come here.
You wouldn't, you can just do it from your home, or else.
Right.
some
Or you
people
could-
don't
or you
have
could
to
give
up
have-
to have one
enough
laptop.
internet connection.
Oh, that's true, yeah, the internet, yeah,
Or you have one laptop here, and you can always project us.
Sure.
I think it'd probably be better here because people have very varied
Maybe we should all one
capabilities
space.
of their internet.
Yeah, yeah. How, is the internet good enough here?
Oh,
yeah.
For
Yes.
video conference?
Do they have fiber here?
Yeah, I could connect my computer to my projector.
Yeah.
Yes,
With
right, exactly.
HDMI,
Right.
and that would
Yep,
handle it.
yep,
It'd be
yep.
nice for us if you were all together, so that, for one,
Yes.
you can police each other and not talk to us all at the same time.
Right.
But you can have more of a conversation.
What about us seeing them? Who's asking the questions? In other words, the other way.
One of their
Visual.
computer would have to have a camera.
This is the advantage of Zoom.
Could they be?
Right.
Yeah.
That anybody who speaks
It shows up.
Yeah,
It
that
shows
would be
up.
a hologram.
Okay, I'm not familiar, Steve is, very
I mean,
familiar.
that's, but it does
Well, and I-
require having internet access. It doesn't require high capacity.
So, I mean, I think there's a couple of things. We could certainly, many of us might be able to be here. If you said, no, I'll dial into Zoom, connect into Zoom.
It's an option.
Because I don't wanna go out, it's raining, but I don't know. I mean, I can figure that out.
Sunshine.
But yeah. But I think to answer your question, yes, teleconference would
Okay.
would work.
Can we pick a date? Because the end of August, unfortunately, we'll be here before we all know it. And it helps us to have a target to be able to get you kind of a draft handout with the findings we're gonna walk through.
So time, maybe seven, we say 7:00.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, is this the preferred night, Wednesday night?
Depends on
Vicky,
Wednesday.
Vicky has problems with Wednesday night.
Some, yeah. Some of them.
Or Thursday night?
We
Well,
have-
then we'd have a planning
Well-
board.
Then we'll need some-
So Vicky, what Wednesdays on the end of August, towards the end of August might work for you?
The 22nd, I think, is one Wednesday at the end of August, it's gonna work for me.
Okay.
15th is also.
So August 15th?
Too soon, and I'm in Plastow that night.
Okay, so August 22nd?
Kind of soon, but would that work, the 22nd work for you?
I wouldn't be there since it's my wife's birthday.
All right.
It's a good
So-
reason.
So do we, what about a
Priorities.
different night?
How about
Any day of the week?
23rd?
What's that?
Friday?
Friday?
Thursday?
Well, do we have a meeting that
Yeah,
night?
it's a regularly scheduled meeting, yeah.
It's a regularly
Thank you.
scheduled planning board meeting, but, I mean, this is.
We could be the first part of your agenda.
Okay,
Yeah?
yeah.
So what date was that?
Well, but the only thing about the first part of the agenda, I think honestly, unless you have nothing else on the agenda.
It's gonna take up the whole.
Yeah, I think it
Do
would
we
take up the
have,
whole night.
we don't have.
What about the first week of September?
I like I like anything that slows it down.
I am wide open. First week of
Okay,
September.
what about you, Vicki? No? What about a Friday? Are people good with Friday or Tuesday?
Fridays are no.
Tuesday?
Tuesdays.
Not
Let's do it.
Tuesday the fourth. 'cause I have-
What about Tuesdays in general?
When is Labor Day? Is it the second? Third,
It's the
rather?
third.
What about Wednesday the 5th?
That looks good.
Yeah. It happens that that's what my calendar's on,
What-
so I
What
think.
day of the week is
When,
it?
when are you free
It's a
on
Wednesday.
Wednesdays?
When am I free after Labor Day? Let's see, Rosh Hashanah, I'm available. And as far as I know, the 11th I'm available, but sometimes my work spills over Tuesday nights.
So what are the dates on those, or what?
So the 10th is good, but it's
Yeah.
Rosh Hashanah. The 11th is a possibility.
Not the fifth?
Not the 5th.
So the 10th or the 11th? Is that too late?
No,
Oh.
late's not a problem.
Oh, wait, I'm away that whole week.
This
I'm
is why I
sorry.
wanted to do this here.
And it is, yeah, I do see Rosh Hashanah.
About
But
the
Well,
sixth?
what
that
about-
whole week I'm gone.
For the planning board, would you be willing to give up the 6th to do this?
To give up what?
Thursday, Thursday the 6th, just to do
We don't
this?
have-
We don't have one of the,
Russ is gonna be away.
So the
He's
second
away.
is gonna be fourth.
He
What
thought
about-
he's away the next week.
Yeah, I'm here at the 6th. It's the next week I'm away.
Well, you guys go, because I just.
well, what if we dedicate a planning board meeting to it? That'll just be what it is. I mean, it sounds like that's the thing that works for most people. What's the date on that,
23rd.
Well, the 23rd, and
And
what about the?
Or the
Wait,
13th.
what month are we in?
August.
We just went back to August for a
We just went
moment.
back
I
to
have a
August.
little
Okay.
piece of paper.
So
in the way.
August, what, you seem to have a
August
grasp
30th?
of when we're meeting. So August, what is the second planning board meeting, August?
The 23rd.
23rd, and you can do that, Vicki? So let's sacrifice that,
Is that gonna work for you?
Excuse me,
23rd?
sacrifice?
It's tight.
sacrifice the
Tight.
meeting.
Yeah,
It'll be
it's
draft.
tight, it's tight time-wise, but it will be draft, yeah. If you,
But
you know,
that- I mean, that's okay. If we
I'll run the
into it
scenarios and then
knowing- yeah.
get them to you,
Mhm.
and then we'll discuss the scenarios.
Yep.
Steve will have,
I'll have some analysis.
he'll have some analysis
We'll
of
be
these
refining the
things.
outreach, which we still have to talk about.
Yep.
So the 23rd of August? Going once, going twice?
At 7 PM?
7 PM.
Okay.
And,
I'm out of town that week.
No.
We're never gonna get everybody.
We're never
together.
going to get this whole bunch of.
August and
We'll take
September,
good
we're not
notes.
gonna get everybody.
Okay.
And if you have a
Can-
computer
can
and you
you-
happen
Yeah,
to be.
can you zoom in if we're using Zoom?
No, we're actually hiking that week, so. just-
Oh, come on.
Don't even try.
Just bring a long cord.
okay, let's just do that on the 23rd.
That sounds great.
And
We'll set up
one of us better
Would you guys
remember
really entertain
to tell
questions for me and
David
send a
Robbins.
presentation?
We'll get it to you,
Oh,
we'll get it
sure.
to everyone as soon as we can.
But when do you leave for your hiking? I'm not gonna
So you'll
get
do
done
that?
too much before the 23rd.
Well, I can give you questions, I mean, I can look at.
Oh,
these
you,
things like
oh,
a map.
questions for me.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, yes,
you
yes,
send
yes,
them
yeah,
out?
of course.
I'm not kind of enough of a guy, so I.
Okay, great, that'd be great.
And you'll see the minutes that they have too, which
Right.
will. Okay.
So you're gonna get quite to beforehand? Were you
No,
saying
I
after,
will
after? After, okay.
So our plan for the 23rd will be, we'll have a handout. You'll definitely have the handout for the meeting. We'll try to get it to you ahead of time if it's done, so that you can actually read it and think about it. And then we'll make a presentation via Zoom and get into discussion.
And who's gonna be responsible for setting up the Zoom?
I can set it up, I think, and send you an invitation, so I can
No, but I
send you.
mean, that we have,
Physically.
what are we?
Well, I can
Physically
dial
here.
it in on my
So
computer,
you-
I've got a projector.
And you
in
can
the
project
closet.
it.
Oh, we have a projector?
The, will we go on here?
Yeah.
The only thing would be a little warped, unless you get the computer up high. Oh, you have gotten it up high? Okay, great.
That's fine.
You
Perfect.
worried about how you're gonna look on screen?
No, I'm worried about like my 7s looking like 8s.
Well, we can also send the file too, so if you
No,
wanna be
no,
looking
we-
along.
We do this all the time.
Yeah, but it's
Okay.
definitely something.
Sounds like a good way to do it.
Yeah, and there'll be handouts.
Yeah, if you could get it at least a day ahead, it would help.
Oh, yeah.
us Read it, yeah.
That shouldn't be a problem.
I was thinking more like 20 minutes, but if you needed a whole day.
And I was thinking a week, so a day's good.
Well, David has to, you'll send it to David Robbins, right, then he'll have to email to all of us. So we'll have to,
I was gonna send it to Sue.
Yep.
okay.
And
so
have her
we'll
share.
And then she can email.
Yep.
Okay. Either one.
Okay, so that date is set. When we met last time, we talked about doing a public forum. Sue and I have had some conversation back and forth about what the format of that is and whether we can do more than one. If we do one public forum and the concern is just flexibility of people's schedules to attend, the one solution I shared for that would be to do it as an open house, where we'd have data available, people can come in, they can see the data, they can provide feedback, they can fill stuff out, but there would only be one time that we had him come over for the show.
I'm concerned about that in terms of, you know, people feeling comfortable that they've had a chance to participate. So ideally, and this isn't an ideal world,
Right.
I'd prefer more than one.
So we provided a budget if you want to do additional ones, but there's additional cost.
Right.
Yeah.
And that came up, and Vicki, you had talked about the
I
possibility
don't
of,
know why we couldn't ask the Lyme Foundation
The Lyme
to
Foundation.
fund that.
but
have a-
we'd have to get right on that, right? And that would have to be done through the select board.
Yeah.
No,
Well, I mean, you guys,
no,
you
it
need
doesn't
to,
have to be the
can you,
select board, anyone can do it.
can you approve it though, so that
Yes, we'll
it gets
approve it,
sent in?
it's approved.
Okay.
It can't be to anybody's benefit coming from a not-for-profit, so it has to be,
Has to
it
be
it
to
would be,
town.
the money probably should come to the
Yeah.
select board.
Yeah.
and that-
So,
that's
so,
illegal.
so who's gonna apply, the select board?
No, the planning board can apply, just
Planning
if
board
we
can
want to
apply.
have the select
So
board
we-
on board with that.
So, okay, so we can apply as long as the select board, so we should get, well, first of all, we have to agree on the particulars, but should we agree on the particulars, we would have to get on that right away.
Right, and I would think because we have the 2-meeting estimate that we could, go for that amount of money.
Okay,
I agree.
I agree with that.
There's no
Because
reason
that
why
would
we
give us
shouldn't.
3,
Yeah,
and
I
that's,
think 3 is good.
otherwise, people are gonna feel shut out, and then you're
Exactly.
gonna have the,
Same thing that happened, well, it's not the same thing, but a variation of what happened last time, which I'd really like to avoid, where the people who did it went to so much trouble, and then there was dissatisfaction, and it messed things up.
I think maybe the planning board and the LCDC should apply together. right?
Sure,
yeah.
that's fine, yeah, the more the merrier.
Well, because it's kind of a combined
Right.
group here. so-
I think that's
One
appropriate.
person has to take the point, and right now it can't be me.
Who wants to take the point? I'm looking at anybody but me.
These two are out.
Now, don't all jump
I
up at
mean,
once.
I don't think it needs to be that extensive. I can write up something, it's like 1 page they don't want to read. So, I mean, I can write 1 page.
You talked me into it.
Thank you, Vicki.
Thank you.
You know how to write it.
Yeah, well, it's just.
Yeah, but you know the
straightforward,
ropes, so.
yeah.
So if you go that route and you have 3 public forums, do you see these as kind of carbon copies, the 3 at just different times and days so that you get the broadest appeal? Or do you see an
What
evolution?
are our other alternatives?
The other alternative is that you spread it out a little bit more so that if we get feedback at one of the public forums, we go back and maybe we tweak stuff and then we come back, it's revised.
Isn't that what you wanna have happen?
I'm kind of putting the question to you, or do you see 3 of them happening a kind of quick step within a 2-week span?
I think that the latter makes more sense for us, in that we can have one and then tweak it a little bit, and then have a second one.
And hold it at different time.
Right. Yeah.
So
And
are
I
you
can- I
saying
can
keep them
see-
close together
No, well,
or spread them out?
I think there should be some time between the first and second one. Between the second and third one, I think there's probably not a huge need for a lot of time. Between the first and second, in order to give us time to digest what was said there at the
Yeah.
first, get it to you guys so we can revise a little bit, I think it makes sense to have a couple weeks in there to kind of break it up. So, I don't know what other people think.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea that we'll learn something, we'll learn what worked and what didn't work the first
Right.
one, and be able to make some adjustments makes sense.
Should we pick dates?
Well, we just
Because
met
if we
you, you
don't-
know.
No, we have to.
Yeah, because we want to start, I'm going to develop a flyer for you that has this
Yeah,
series
yes,
of dates
yes,
and
let's
the
do
location.
the
And
dates.
we need to confirm that the dates are
So
available
what,
for the school or
what
whatever.
dates make sense for you guys?
Well, first of all, I think the school is the best location, you
School
said?
is open, and Jeff said there's very little going on in the evening.
Okay,
Uh,
so do we think an evening during the week in late September for the first one?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, just one second. I mean, we're going to be meeting on the 23rd, was the first cut.
Yeah.
Get some feedback from you folks, and I know it will be solid feedback in that I will be making modifications, I'm sure of that. So then you're saying the first public forum would be the end of September?
Well, I'm thinking a couple things. We're gonna have to refine materials based on the feedback.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to create visuals. We may have
Yeah.
to have some printed items.
Yeah, gotcha,
So I'm
okay.
trying to think of like people in my office too.
Oh, yeah.
Gives
So
them
my
enough
work
time.
doesn't take any time and doesn't need any
No,
time,
it's
but
not
yours
everyone.
needs a lot.
Yes,
Okay, I got it.
I'm glad you guys worked that out.
Yeah.
How much time do you guys need?
Well, I'm also thinking like beginning of September is just a crazy time. Everyone's getting back to their school schedules.
No,
So we won't get their
that's
attention,
actually, I think, a big consideration.
including me.
We want,
So I say mid to late September should be the first.
So
Right.
the week of the 17th, one evening, is that?
Does that give you guys enough
Compromise?
time? Does that give you guys enough time between the meeting and us?
I think so, don't you?
I'm sorry?
The week of the 17th gives us enough time. It's nearly a month, as Sue said. Yeah, and the following week I'm away for,
so what day of the week makes the most sense?
and this is just for the first one, we can move it around.
But for Lyme, what makes the most sense?
Well, I don't know, you may have to check with the school. I know the band is there on Tuesday in a separate room, so that's not a big deal, but
We've
you
had
may have to
meetings
check
there.
with the school, because I don't know if they,
I
Right.
for example,
checked with
there's
Jeff.
the basketball people in the gym or something like
There's no
that.
basketball in September, so.
It's not, it's still soccer,
But you got an all clear.
pretty much, yeah, so.
Does a Monday
give
night
me
work?
dates.
Monday night work?
It's okay with me.
Do you wanna try Monday the 17th?
Oops,
Not for you?
not for me.
Okay,
All right.
it's kinda important you're there.
18th?
That week is,
That week's no good.
from the 17th to the 25th.
So maybe we go back
And
to
that
the
week, no,
following
that week before that is the week that I'm away.
No, so we're,
The
let's,
24th?
24th,
Okay,
That's Monday,
yeah.
Monday the
You're going
24th?
to the 25th, and I'm gone the rest of that.
Oh, boy.
26th,
I'm gone. I could zoom in, but that will not make Russ happy.
No.
is the 12th too soon?
Probably not. You think it's too soon? 12th? We're gonna meet on the 23rd.
Russ said he's gone that week.
Yeah, I'm gone that week.
23rd. Glad you keep track.
Yeah, that
October?
whole week's gone.
The first week in
Ouch.
October, 3rd, 4th?
Does it come down to that? huh?
First, second, third,
October
fourth?
1st?
October 1st, what day of the week is that?
My memory won't last from August till October.
I'll help you.
All right, so
Okay.
everybody okay with Monday, October 1st?
Yep.
7.
There you
Our
go.
materials should be dialed in by then. All right, so we just gotta double check with the school.
October when?
First.
And
And do we think that's a 6 or 7 o'clock meeting? What makes 6?
Six?
what, and 6,
How-
because
how
people are gonna eat
long
dinner.
is
No, I think it's 7 o'clock is,
What?
7 o'clock seems to be normal.
How long did it
Yeah.
last?
Well, I think the primary reason will be, we'll explain the rationale for the work. And then we'll have Russ explain, primarily the meeting findings. And we'll provide that in interactive forum. People should be able to verbally ask questions, but they should also be able to submit their thoughts and stuff written. And then you always have the option, until we see the data, let's talk about it again on the 23rd, because if we see data that we think deserves to have some kind of breakout tables or stations that people might want to stop and spend some time with, we could always add that. But I think having an hour and a half, should be able to cover all the intro, overview, discussion, and allow people to, mill around as
So
well.
you're saying 7 to 8:30?
Right. It's a long way of saying that, but
Okay. Yeah, my concern with 6 is that most people with
yeah.
kids.
Right,
Yeah.
dinner time.
Yeah,
You can get the kids settled and then you can.
You
come
wanna
back
have
again.
people who've had a chance anyway to eat and
Yeah, he said.
Yeah, it's hard enough to listen to with a
Right,
full stomach,
right,
but
right.
on an empty stomach, it's more than most people
can
are
bear.
So the first,
asking too much.
and then do we want to go out a couple weeks and pick a different time of week?
I have to take a Wednesday the 17th, and a
Okay.
Thursday the 25th. Does that work?
25th is planning board.
Yep.
Or-
17th works.
So, we're in October, right?
Mhm.
17th?
17th?
17th is or isn't it the same?
The 25th is,
Oh.
17th is a Wednesday.
Okay, so October 17th is the second one. And that's plenty of time to
Yeah,
tweak.
totally. And let word spread around town, get people riled up so they come out on the 17th.
Right.
Handing out the torches.
Our pictures on the,
The parking lot.
our pictures on the matchbooks. That's why we're here.
It's October 17 and
October 17th at 7.
And do you wanna give up another
24th.
planning board meeting? Or do you wanna keep it on a Wednesday?
Well,
fine, just keep it on one.
yeah,
Well, but I mean, there's people that have regular things on Wednesday.
yeah, we gotta give them
I think
the
it's enough
chance.
nights, we have a Monday and a Wednesday already.
You wanna go to Thursday, November 1st?
Just a thought, do you want to try like a Saturday?
They don't work.
No.
No? Okay.
You're asking my opinion.
We've tried them and
I'd rather not.
in the past,
I'm
and
just trying to
everybody
think-
has something
Yeah,
I'm
else
just
going
trying to
on.
think, you know, that some people can't wait.
You're doing the right thing.
Sunday morning at 9.
Or midnight.
So you guys could just come to the dump and do a presentation to the dump.
You know, that.
There you go.
So what are we doing for the third one? What do we got?
We were, they have the 24th, but
I don't think
They
we should meet
wanted
on
a different
Wednesday.
day.
I think we have to do something else.
Let's think about what's gonna happen. At the first one, okay, so we come back here in what, a half an hour? You'd go out for me to do the analysis?
Yeah.
About a half an hour and a half. No, we come August 23rd, I think it is,
Yep,
right?
then we have our work session.
We have a work session. I make some changes.
Yeah, right.
Then
You share
we
that.
we share that. You have the next public forum is September. So there'll be changes for that
No,
first forum in
The next
September.
one is
Yeah,
October 1st.
October 1st, okay, thank you, yeah. And then we may have more changes after that. This one that's on, the third one should be, in effect, a final presentation, I think, right?
And then we still have.
So do you mean by that it'll be really a different, that's where you're presenting conclusions, that it'll be less of feedback?
That's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
I don't know.
I think that way when we,
I
because
leave
we,
it to Steve.
because we have it in the budget to then come and have a final meeting with all of you, like
Right,
in
there's
this
gonna be,
room.
there's gonna be a written report
Right.
Yes.
after all the town meetings.
Right. And so it should be really, okay, we've had 2 public forums, we've taken that input, and here's where we really think this thing ends, and give people a chance to still react.
Right, we still need to allow feedback,
and-
because some people will be there for the first time.
Exactly. And then we'll prepare all the final materials and bring those to you at a final meeting with you.
Okay.
How
So
about
that's the
having
meeting.
the
It's a-
final meeting or one of the meetings at 4 in the afternoon, for people who don't drive after dark?
That's fine by us, 3:30 even. But yeah.
Does that work for the final one?
On the 22nd?
What day of the week is that?
Monday.
Monday? Sounds,
Well,
Well, that's very close to the 17th.
Okay.
I'm just wondering if
You need more time?
we're gonna change anything, I don't
The
know.
29th.
29th?
29th, okay?
4
So
o'clock?
Okay,
Wait,
29th.
the 29th is a Monday
Yeah,
again.
Right.
Yeah.
but it'll be in the
But it's during the
afternoon.
day as opposed to the evening.
But do you want your last meeting at 4 o'clock? I don't mind the middle one. I'm just trying to envision the.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I'm just trying to envision
Good point.
the, I
Right.
think more people are gonna be able to be around at 7 o'clock than 4. I think trying 4 would be fine, but I would do that more like in the middle meeting.
I agree.
So you want to do the 17th at 4?
But,
Yeah.
I would hate to have your last
So you're
grandiose
saying-
presentation
Before 6 people?
at
or-
4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Do you think that's gonna present a problem at the school during the 4 o'clock?
yes,
Yes.
because of sports.
I mean, maybe not.
Soccer.
We can ask the question.
Still soccer
Maybe,
season.
maybe not, but
October?
we're never gonna.
It's still soccer season.
That would be
Yeah.
October 17th would be,
Soccer's
Yeah.
still going on,
Yeah,
there's
I-
still gonna be, if there's rain, there'll be practice.
And what time, yeah,
Check
and-
with the schools, I think it's
yeah, the
out there.
school is a problem.
The teachers are almost always there if you go
Yeah.
drive by.
Is there another location we can do at 4 PM?
Where do you have your town meetings? At the school?
It's all school. It's all there.
Well, we could use the community room.
What you're saying is you won't have as many.
But
people
you're
there.
gonna have a lot of traffic and parking
See a
issues.
hand over there.
Oh,
I just had the thought, I didn't know whether I was supposed to speak or not, but, I'm just wondering, I don't think it's ever been done in Lyme, but what about taping the first, open meeting? People can submit any questions or, possibilities to the head of the planning board, or whoever's the director, the chairman of this. And then they could see it at their leisure at home. And then the next one would be fine tuned or more fine tuned.
Well, I think that's a great, and we have a person who's doing it.
That's right. That's a great idea.
It is a good
Yeah.
idea.
Now,
Put it on YouTube.
At 4 o'clock, the church might be open, at least as a room,
What they
and have the facilities.
Okay, if the school's not available, I'll.
Okay, so we're gonna change the 17th to 4 PM, is that right?
I would suggest that.
Yeah, okay.
And I don't know if the church is acceptable,
Well, as long as they don't take up a collection during it, I think it's all right.
The church, and if that's a problem, we can go to the academy or something.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll
so
find a
church
spot.
or
We'll
academy.
find a spot, so,
We'll find a
okay,
spot.
so the 17th is at 4, done, okay.
And
then,
then we go to
29th back to 7?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're
So
on.
that'll be 2 Monday
two
meetings.
Mondays.
That's true.
How about
Right.
the 30th, Tuesday?
That's fine by me.
Okay.
but.
Okay, so
Band
which
is
one
making a noise, that's
just got
all.
eliminated then?
What?
None, right? We hadn't set the 24th, it looks
Right.
like.
So
Okay,
now we're
so-
go to the 30th?
30th.
30th at 7.
What day of the week is it?
Tuesday. Tuesday.
Well, as I said, the band is making a lot of noise there.
But we've had meetings in there with the band,
Band may make it jolly.
Might actually attract a crowd.
I'd rather listen to them.
So the band practices on Tuesday nights? Okay, do we know what time they practice?
You know, 7 to 9,
In the band room, which is adjacent to the room we're
Well-
in, or?
either that or the gym.
The whole school.
At some point, something has to change and the band can go in another room. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Either that or you're gonna do
Well,
it Friday.
I just want, before we say don't worry about it, I mean, I think even if they're in another room, but it's like still penetrating. I don't-
Well, if it's in
we-
another
in other
room,
words,
it'll
if we
be the
could
opposite
change-
end of the school.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
okay.
I don't think,
I
I don't
think,
think.
we can ask them
Okay.
to move far away.
This close to.
So October 30th at 7, at the, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
At 7 PM.
It's just a little more parking problem. Because I will have 20 cars there, the band.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
that's a good point.
Put town meeting
Well,
there.
we've had town meetings there, so I mean,
I
it's
know.
not anywhere near as big as
Nobody
that.
So
wants
it's-
to sell us
what
these
date?
days, so.
October.
So it's,
Yeah.
the park my road up and down, so all right.
So with those evenings,
Yeah.
So the 1st, the 17th.
Martha Tecca had offered to help with this, right? With outreach?
Right.
Didn't you-
She had wanted to come in to discuss, that she was gonna make an appointment, but I think yes.
Okay, because, I think CCL is great for outreach to the
Yeah.
community, but I also think that offering babysitting from, that night, we have a chance
All
of
right,
getting
so,
some families.
so I'll email Martha with these dates
To do the outreach. yeah.
and ask if she'll publicize it.
Right,
Well, and we can help, because we'll create a flyer with the series of dates and locations once they're confirmed.
yeah.
And I'll pass a draft flyer around, you can all give comments, we can make changes to it, and then that can be a digital as well as it can be printed out and put
And
around.
should I ask her about babysitting?
Yeah, if she could.
So can we put this on
coordinate
this,
that.
sir?
Yes.
Yes.
So that'll get a lot of people.
So
Okay,
do
good.
we want
The
to?
town listserv?
We also have a church newsletter.
Yeah,
Okay.
do we want to treat these dates as provisional for 24 or 36 hours and talk to people and say, say to Martha, say to the churches, say to whatever, we're looking at these dates. If the blood runs out of their face and say, oh my God, no, that's the date.
If there's something that we've forgotten about that's big in town, yes, but trying to please
Right.
a larger group of people is gonna be
It's
possible.
just.
I agree.
Odd
And
numbers.
that's why we
We
have
just
to
looked at
agree.
this with-
Well,
yeah.
we need to verify the locations on all of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should assume these are the dates,
Exactly.
unless we get major feedback, and then we would let you know right away.
Okay, I agree.
Because it's gonna get,
It's already been hard to
Yeah.
predict these
Yes,
days, I agree.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you're gonna confirm dates?
Right now.
Oh, you're good. All right, so I have one more thing that I want to put on the table that I don't think we need to solve tonight, but I want you to be thinking about, and we definitely need to solve it on the 23rd. We have on here, we talked about the possibility of doing an online feedback form, which if we're gonna do one, we probably wanna have it launched by the time we hold the first forum, and we probably wanna be advertising it as we start advertising the forums. And so my question is, what do we wanna ask? And it might be that we can ask some really open-ended questions and not spend a lot of time trying to craft the perfect questions. but-
Okay,
Not reading them?
I'm sorry to interrupt, Steve,
Yeah.
but on the 23rd, you're saying before the
The
23rd?
23rd is just this work
I
session.
know, I understand,
Yeah.
but when would you do that survey?
No, I wanna talk about the questions on the 23rd. You wouldn't get
Oh,
launched-
okay,
you wouldn't get
I
launched
misunderstood, I'm
just
sorry.
before the
Yeah,
forums.
all right, yeah.
But, you know, we kind of have these, I think we want to provide a pressure relief valve for people who think they have the answer. Whether it's they think they know what kind of development would solve the problems, or they think they know what kind of cost-cutting practices would solve the problems. We want to start to ferret out what the issues are and allow people to voice those opinions.
Well, we could have it open from the first meeting to the third meeting, so.
Absolutely.
Was that, for almost 4 weeks, right, between the first and third meeting, so that would give them plenty of time, and I would think you'd keep it simple, 4
Yeah.
or 5 open-ended questions,
Yeah.
and that's it.
Because one thing, speaking for myself, I'd like to avoid is what we've been through before, where we ask these very specific but
Right.
ridiculous questions, do you like apple pie? Everybody likes apple
No, they
pie.
I don't want to get.
See the problem, see the problem?
I stand corrected. But
I'm with you, though.
you know what I'm
I
talking
know,
about.
totally know.
So I like the idea of open-ended questions, that just give people a chance to,
Then whatever is on there.
whatever they want to say.
It's really helpful, and then the other thing that's helpful about it is at the forums, it gives us a chance to say, we know we're giving you a lot of new information tonight, and as people have a chance to think about it, they can of course give us feedback right at the forum, but some people need to go home and digest it, and they need to spend time with it.
And the fact is, you know, Lyme does have a lot of smart, creative people, and some, you know, it would be a good thing, maybe somebody will
You might get some good
get
ideas.
some.
We've got,
You said you were gonna do this online, so how would that work?
So initially, what I want to focus on with you all, and that's why I wanted to get you thinking about before we have our work session on the 23rd, what types of questions should we ask if we're going to have a couple of open-ended questions? Once we know what those are, we'll create an online feedback form using SurveyMonkey, but we can also create a paper document that you can print out and have here at Town Hall. The library said they'd be happy if we have any kind of feedback form. You could have a couple locations for a paper version as well. So it gives people the flexibility that they could fill it out, drop it off. We'll put those in.
So online, that would be on this?
Now, we use SurveyMonkey, which is an online survey website that we have.
it comes in by email and then you click on it and
And you fill
Yeah,
out.
pops up.
So
Fill it
you
out.
have everybody's email address and.
No, we give them the address, they have to find
They,
their way there.
they go to it.
Yeah,
There you
they
go.
go to it.
Okay.
Well, you could send it out on the listserv.
So they're on this.
Yeah, you can put it out on the
Yeah,
listserv.
and then we can provide an opportunity for a print version too.
We'll send everybody over to your house.
CCL has a weekly news update, so we can get into their weekly update.
Oh,
for
good.
Their news for the week, because they do an online weekly, here's what's happening. We have the church newsletter, which goes out every month, and then we have the listserv, which
There's
is
a
daily.
bulletin board right in front of the post office and Ace Hardware, you can stop down there.
That's great, like a couple of those locations are helpful. Okay.
Now,
So what is-
before the first
Yeah.
town gathering.
Forum.
Yeah.
forum, is there any information that's going to be out there for people to see prior to that meeting?
Let's talk about it in August when you get
Yeah,
to see.
because, you know, the more people that look at what's gonna come up, then they may be better prepared. I mean, you can't open a meeting and have people looking at 15 pages and trying to
Now,
digest.
Russ will walk them through. Here's what we did.
Yeah, but it'd be nice to have some, I don't know, we'll see on the 23rd, the salient
Here's
points.
the
could be
issue,
out.
if you just put stuff out there with no narrative to go with it,
That's
then you get freaking crazy stuff coming. I mean, you gotta walk them through it so
Open
they
to
understand. what you're trying to
Absolutely
say,
right.
so.
Right.
I think
And this stuff is not native knowledge, you know, it's,
I think I was concerned, part of what's gonna address your concern is having the forum, the online forum, it as well, having multiple meetings, so people can see it the first time, digest
They
it,
can come back.
come back, or,
Yeah.
right, is that
That's
your
right.
concern?
Yeah, there may be more, and I'm just thinking out loud again, there may be more detail in the presentation to you folks. There may be more of the background data and whatnot. I'm thinking maybe to keep the forum concise and focused. We want to make sure it's not, that I'm not wandering all over the planet.
Right.
We
You know,
can
I
always
wanna be
dig
able
in
to say,
deeper with the questions.
Then
but-
we can probably do a little narrative with it as well, as a preliminary. This is a
You want to
preliminary
guide people
now.
through the data so that they can understand where you're coming from. Because if you just stick it out there, you get all sorts, people just don't understand it. I mean, they don't understand what you're trying to do.
I
so.
think we need to put the advertising for the forum with some hooks, like, did you know? Blah,
Okay.
blah, blah, blah,
We can do that on the,
blah. You know, just two factoids that you might already know now that are not disputable. And then, well, we wanna talk about this and other things about Lyme and its tax base and economic future, whatever. So I think you need to have something substantive together.
Can do that
That's a-
easily.
That's
Yeah.
a little controversial.
and we can do them as infographics so they catch the eye.
Yep.
Their interest, yeah.
Okay.
Now, Sue, are we going to keep the populace up to date with what's going on?
Who's we? Who was on it?
Well, no, I mean, this group is gonna, you know, should we tell the folks that we're meeting and,
One thing we could do
Aren't there
is you
minutes
know,
that
your
go out?
video could be posted on the, I mean, the link, on the listserv stating that here, you know, we had a meeting, a joint meeting, and you can give a little summary, this, with the consultants, and,
I
Please,
think
Lloyd.
just to let them know that something's happening.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
You know, so it isn't all at once, what, these
Yeah.
characters
Yeah.
are doing what?
absolutely.
So, did the CDC disband or something? 'Cause I'm like, there used to be like 8, like, not planning board members of the CDC. Are they like away on vacation?
Miles is in Ohio, I don't know where,
Chris, I don't know where he is.
Chris is away.
Chris is away, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not for lack of interest.
Summertime.
No.
Because we're
Oh,
making
they're still-
decisions right now, and they're
Yeah.
not really here at the table, and I know that,
Yeah, but I mean, we,
Okay.
always have to go with who's here.
Correct.
Now, I probably could have done a better job of keeping everybody informed about the meetings, but.
we sent an ad out. No, just last week, didn't you send a reminder out?
Yeah.
That was
Yeah,
fine.
we sent
We've all been warned
It has to be
appropriately.
sent out,
Okay.
you know, the day of, 2 days before.
This is summertime, but people go on vacation.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just trying to make sure they're
Yeah.
still with.
And I don't think we've decided
Okay.
anything astonishing here that.
Yeah.
It's just scheduled, really.
So, and as far as minutes to this morning's meeting, I thought about it, and I thought, I spent 5 hours transcribing one phone call, and, I'm not really.
Steve's got good.
I
notes.
have a lot of notes today,
You know,
and I'll provide it to you.
so provide the community with the minutes of the discussions.
Why
We
don't,
discussed problems,
why don't we
discussed this,
consider
discussed that,
your video
Mhm.
the official minutes?
I'm just thinking
Tonight's
about,
meeting, yes.
about
Well-
Meg Sheehan, who asked about like what's going on, and so.
But
there
she
are
never
people-
shows up at the meetings either.
Well, maybe she's working away
Right.
out of, away from here, so she can't make it, but I just feel like there needs to be some kind of trail
Well-
about how we got to where we are, and that people could be following along, and it's not an incident that we're having.
This is more of a
I think
logistics
they need to
meeting
be
anyway.
advertised better.
It doesn't matter, logistics meetings are still public,
Yeah.
meetings, and
Well,
everyone's
we have
invited.
public here.
I know, and we,
One public.
yeah, okay, one public
Was
is.
this,
We're thankful
was
for
was
it.
this, were these meetings today advertised on the list here?
Yes,
Today?
yes,
They were,
yes.
okay.
So it's okay for Rich to, there's no reason why Rich can't post that officially
Right.
and say, here is the record of the meeting, please
Yeah.
watch.
It's
and-
better than minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Except
Far
that
more
takes an
in-
hour and a half to
Yeah.
go through, and not
Right.
everybody's got an hour and a half where they really wanna listen in, so
Make it fast
apologies.
forward.
Yeah, well, even you can't hear what people are saying. So I had 2 things. I am assuming that all we're asking for is the same amount of money as Steve put in his memo for the 2 meetings, and that really doesn't need to be reviewed, but that I will send it to John, who's the planning board chairman, and he can, you know, massage it and then be responsible for.
What will I do at that point? I'll send it to who?
Send it to the Lyme Foundation?
By,
I'm not-
by Pony Express or
No, but email.
just email?
Who's the grant?
The grants chairman was Abby Murphy, and she's now retired from the board, so, and a new grants chair hasn't been, so, hasn't been appointed, so there's a general Lyme Foundation.
So when you send me the language, just send me,
I'll give you
who
well,
to
Peter
send it to.
Blanchard's the president or the
so just tell me who to
chairperson.
send it to
Yeah,
and
yeah,
give me the
yeah.
address.
I think
So
when we-
there's that, and I just wanna be sure that, can you resend me your, your estimate, so I can include that with the, you know, having something that's very real, yeah, it really costs this much, would be good. Yeah, I just looked for it and couldn't find it. 'Cause
Sue's
it's-
gonna forward it again.
Give it, okay, thank you,
Yeah.
just to me it's great, and then I can attach that, so that's good, okay, we're good, thank you.
I think when we do send it to the Lyme Foundation, we need to really make it clear, make sure that it's coming from the planning board and the LCDC.
That's okay.
Yeah,
I don't even know who's the
not just from
LCDC
the-
chair,
Sure,
because Neil's
yeah.
resigned, right?
So, surprised, nobody stepped up?
Nobody stepped up, so we needed to go through John, because he's
The
the
only
chair.
surviving chairman?
But just make sure the foundation, Lyme Foundation knows that it's
It's a-
applying
Not yet.
jointly.
No, because we didn't have a quorum because.
Yeah, we didn't have a quorum list.
I was having too much fun.
Send it to
collecting
me and I'll
lunch.
make sure it gets out, whatever.
Send-
What are
send
you
what?
talking about sending?
The application to
I'm
the
go-
Lyme
I'm go-
Foundation for the money for
Do
the
you-
2 extra meetings.
I was gonna send it. Do you want me, do you wanna send it?
No, no.
I figured you didn't wanna send it.
No, that's fine, I just.
You said something along those lines
Yeah,
earlier.
yeah.
Okay,
So
so-
I can keep you out of it too,
Yeah.
Thank you.
just, it'll be just for
Spare it.
what.
At least until I get this wrap thing done.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be good.
All right, are we good?
As good as we get.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And you did an awesome job getting people together for us today.
Yeah, thank
It was a
you.
long but
Really
productive
appreciate
day.
it.
Thank you for putting in a really long day.
Yep, it was an important day.
A day that will
Long
live in
time.
infamy.
Yeah.
I think I learned something, but can't remember what it was.
You'll remember in a couple
I
of
will, yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
luckily
but-
Steve was, that
He
couldn't help
jokes
us.
about it, but he remembers it all.
We'll drive carefully.
Thank you very much. Have a good,
We're attempting to do the Berlin first with our 7-year-old. So the forecast is not perfect.